Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. It is a wonderful sunny day in Buffalo. Rain, please stay away for at least another year. We'll start with our pre-show with Russ. Go ahead.
First thing I want to mention, I'll mention it for the next couple days, but if you can go onto my Twitter handle or go onto Facebook on BK Memorial Cup, I'm going to be playing in a charity softball game. It's my third one playing it. It's in Brooklyn. This one I'm managing, so everything's on the line. It's online. It's going to be on radio. It's going to be on a few different things, Twitch. And so, but you also can buy raffles and you also can donate for Alzheimer's research. So if you can help out with that, that's great. If not, if you want to watch and just razz me and rip me, on Monday, that's fine too. That'll be on Saturday and it starts at 1:00.
And I retweeted it.
Thanks. Anyhow, let's talk a little bit about football. I think we have hit a point now where NFL GMs have to really do a lot to outsmart the fans and the blogs and all the other things out there. With gambling research, with fantasy football, fans and everybody else have a lot more information and a lot more just video and data available to them about their players. And just so as an example, and I wrote something on sportsology.com today, people could check it out. So in 2020, the Jets drafted a wide receiver, Denzel Mims. Now, Joe Douglas, that was his first draft for the Jets. He was so tickled about it because he traded down 11 picks to get this player. And that's all he could talk about. Well, that was our guy, and I got an extra draft pick and everything else. Well, right now, this guy's on the third string in preseason. He's basically on the same level as a guy who had one catch all of last year. He has no touchdowns in his career so far. Chase Claypool has 9. As an example, he was drafted one spot after the Jets would have drafted if they kept their spot, so they could have drafted Claypool. And I mentioned another running back they could have taken too. So it just goes to show you that even when you start hearing, and I wrote about another player who's about to get annexed from the team, and he was also from that draft. So the moral of the story here is, Kevin, you've heard this before too with bad franchises. They bring in a guy, they say he's great at drafting, he gets all these other picks. It still doesn't mean it's going to turn into results.
No, that's for sure. And the NFL is a little easier to project than our sport of hockey, where it's even in the first round, it's still only a 60% success rate with success determined by 300 games played. So it's a tough go. And if you think about it, it makes sense because, we're drafting 18-year-olds and the NFL obviously has been able to watch these guys for at least 3 years, usually in college. But yeah, it is funny. In the old days, we used to have a lot of trust in our management of our sports teams.
Whatever they said to us about the prospect, we pretty much had to believe.
Yeah, no, that's true. And, not every game is on television like today's. And more importantly, there's YouTube video of every prospect now.
Everybody.
Out there. And we're all scouts now. Well, I always am amused when I, hear from a reader who said, I just watched so-and-so on YouTube and, I think he's got breakaway speed, and I think this and that. They all sound like they're scouts. So, the one thing I will say that an NHL scout will never be able to tell you about a prospect going into the draft is how good he is in the third period. Because none of them stay for the third period.
True.
So they're all gone.
Except for the tournaments. For the tournaments, they do. But for a lot of other things, they leave.
Yeah, that's right. They're out the door. That's for sure.
It's funny that you bring that up because before I was covering Leaf games, I was covering a lot of Toronto Marley games, and a lot of the scouts are from the Buffalo area, and the drive down the QEW is an hour and a half without traffic, and for say a 3:00 game. The game is over at maybe 5:30, 5:45, and the scouts are usually leaving during the second intermission because even though it's the Marlies game, at most there's 8,000, 9,000 people that in that small arena. and this is during a playoffs, they'll leave early because if they get stuck in traffic, they'll be on the road for an extra hour, an hour and a half. And for a reporter, maybe that's not that big deal, but for scouts who do that, who go to these, go 5 days a week, sometimes they're in Rochester or Syracuse or Utica or wherever, that hour is one less hour they get to sleep. So they do it for a reason, but they do miss out on the third period for these games.
Well, it's true. I mean, they are traveling from place to place to place to place. So, yeah, they got to get to their next place. They got to file their report, and then they could, take it easy for a little while until the next day.
I was at the junior showcase in Plymouth, and it's the first live game I've been to in 2 seasons. And I was there, and I just laughed to myself because here we go in the third period of a game I was watching between Sweden and USA, and right in front of me, all the scouts up as a herd en masse and out the door. And I turned to a colleague and I said, some things never change, so they were out the door.
It's like the running of the bulls in Pamplona.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I guess, you can determine a lot about a prospect in 2 periods of play. So,
yeah, I mean, because again, you know what it is too. They're not always looking for just results. They're looking for technique. They're looking for things behind the play. They're looking for a lot of different things. But more importantly, Kev, across the street from the USA Hockey Arena is a place that apparently has been around in Detroit for a long time, Buddy's. And so I ate there the last time I was there, Buddy's Pizza, and I found it to be really good. Is that a good representative Detroit pizza?
Yeah, I mean, it's been around. They always kind of sell themselves as Detroit's pizza because it was the original one, I think. I'm not sure of this. I was going to say was in Detroit, but I'm not sure that's true. Okay. But there are a few of them around in the Detroit area. But, Buddy's is pretty well known, although I will say that not everybody in Michigan kind of knows about Buddy's.
Really?
Pretty funny, yeah.
Yeah, no, I found it to be good. Like, I actually would take Buddy's Pizza over Chicago Deep Dish. I think Chicago Deep Dish would be third to me for that.
Whoa.
Yeah. Your pizza
really?
first. I would take – because I already had a frozen Detroit pizza like a year ago, and I really liked it. But now this was the first time I had it fresh.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, you can't judge anything on a frozen.
No. But it was the first time I had even heard about, Detroit pizza with the different cheeses they use. And, I got to tell you, this fresh, just plain was awesome. It was really good.
Yeah. It's funny about pizza, especially, I'm older, obviously, but, I grew up in an era before all the pizza franchises showed up. Like Little Caesars. Little Caesars was new when I was a kid, and
Pizza Hut was new.
Yeah. So you had Gino's Pizza and Russo's Pizza, and they were family pizzerias. And I can still remember that in like 63 or 64, you could get a pepperoni large pizza for $1.25 plus delivery.
No,
I still remember that. But the one thing that's different now is, and I always say, and back then, like they used to cook their pizza. Like, you could hold that pizza up sideways and it would all hold together. You do that today and everything slides off.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference. And I miss that taste because that changes the taste when
it does.
Well, there is something to say about it, and we'll get off pizza in a second and get talking hockey.
I like to get off pizza, Mike.
Yeah, I know. No, but the thing is, it's like I have never been to Detroit, so I have not tried Detroit pizza yet. But I've been to New York. I've gone to Yankees games. I've gone and gotten a New York slice in the Bronx, and fold it in half and let the grease drip off, and it's great. And I loved the deep dish in Chicago, but of course I love Buffalo pizza the most because it's all I've known. I mean,
it's good. It's
really good. But to what you're saying, Kev, in the 70s when I grew up, and there were local pizzerias around where I live, and the original owner, the old Italian guy who's slaving on the stove until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, and you're getting a large pizza for I think that time it was like $6, like all the toppings, and it was the best thing that there was. And then the son takes over and tries to make more money by cutting corners. The pizza gets smaller. The sauce gets doesn't taste as good. They scrimp on the toppings, and it's gone. And now, like, there are very few pizza places that were open in the 70s and 80s when I grew up that are still in existence now. And it's heartbreaking because, honestly, my stomach is crying for one of those pizzas.
Well, to answer the chat room, Mark Elias says Windsor, Ontario has great pizza. And you know what? It really does.
For sure.
I was shocked how good it was. I was at a game last February, and they brought in pizza from like a local pizza place. And I was like, all right, I'm game. I'll try it. And it looked like a Sicilian-type pizza, and it was fantastic. I was like, wow. I was very impressed. And
I'm asking my Toronto fans out there to give me Toronto pizza recommendations and not pizza.
Not pizza at the
That's like Pizza Hut. You know, I mean, there's a couple of chains up there that are okay, but there's got to be mom and pop places that are fantastic there, and I want to try them because, you know, the border is opening next week if you have vaccinations.
Yeah, the place to be in New York City is the original Ray's Pizza, and I think it was still, and I think the one in the Village may be the original one, but there's all kinds of copies after that. But even Kevin ate at the Dollar Place and loved it, so it's hard to find.
I still think that's unbelievably good pizza.
I know that place.
It's one of the best deals in New York, where you get 2 pieces of pizza and a can of whatever, Coke or Sprite or whatever you want. You know, it's just unbelievable.
If they don't have Vernors, forget it.
No, they don't have Vernors, but yeah, I mean, that's like it's just the slice of pizza, just the way Mike described it, where you fold it up. Outstanding. Outstanding.
All right, we'll get started. I have a football thing tomorrow that I'll touch on tomorrow. It has to do with the Bills, but I'll save that for tomorrow. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, August 4th, 2021.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, we'll start with, we don't have to go long on this because the saga of Evander Kane is unfolding, but there was a piece in The Athletic yesterday regarding Evander Kane, and I don't think it can be really surprising. The story indicated that a number of San Jose Shark players apparently went to management and said they don't want to play with Evander Kane any longer, and that Doug Wilson tried to move him during the summer and was unsuccessful. Now, Russ, I mean, we've heard of different players on different teams and players not wanting to play with them. But when it goes to the level of them going to management, which I'm assuming they did, because if they're just pissing and moaning about it, nothing's really going to happen. And they acted on it, and they still couldn't move him. I mean, that's an ongoing problem.
It is an ongoing problem. And honestly, it's not just about his current problem. I mean, we've heard problems with him being a teammate before. So this is something that has followed him around for a while, and I don't think it's going to get better. And honestly, the Sharks are in a tough spot. They may get to a point where they decide he's so much of a distraction that we have to just buy him out. And if that's the case, that's the case. But, Kev, I think they're getting close to that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Mike, why don't you look up and see what his contract is left?
I believe he has 4 more years at $7 million per, but I'm looking.
Yeah, that's a Ryan Suter, Zach Parise type buyout.
And they may not be able to buy him out unless they have a player who's going to arbitration, because the second buyout window only is available to a team if they have a player who's going to arb. Yeah,
well, that made I don't know if they do it this year. It'd probably be next year. I mean, maybe they'd like to do it this year, but it depends on how long the investigation goes.
Well, they said it's going to get wrapped up before training camp, which isn't very good for them because they could have just basically put him on suspension.
Well, okay, here you go. I'll give you the buyout. If they had the window to buy him out, and Aiden Hill is an arbitration eligible RFA, so I'm assuming he was one of the 17 people who opted for arbitration. Kane, it would be an 8-year spread on the buyout because he's got 4 years left at $7 million. It's except for The first year and the last 4 years are about $1.8 million. So that's almost $2 million. Year 2 is almost $4 million. Year 3 is almost $3 million, and year 4 is almost $5 million. So this is almost as onerous as the Parise Suter.
Yeah, but it's it's not horrendous. You
No.
know, I mean, like you can live. Like you got one horrible year, the one that's $5 million. So yeah, that's doable in my book.
It is doable, but it'll be interesting because I guess, Kev, they'll wait and see what the investigation says, because if he's proven to have done this, then they probably can get out of the contract.
Yeah, for sure. If it's proven that he bet on hockey, but the rest of it, it will be they're not going to get him on a morals clause if he didn't bet on hockey. It's a difficult situation. I found it curious too about the idea of players saying they didn't want to have him around, because it's not like it was in the 1980s where teams all hung out together all the time. Like you talk to players who played in the 80s, and after practice, 8 or 10 of them would be down at the bar, and drinking and having a good time, and it doesn't really happen like that anymore. Now people are so conscious about what goes into their body, and I want to talk a little bit about the Nathan MacKinnon story.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that as well. So you don't have the same camaraderie. I think smaller groups now that go out together, as opposed to the larger groups when, it was sort of part of the tradition. Like guys would say, come on, we're all going out,
Right.
If the team was playing well or it wasn't playing well, either way, they wanted you to go out together. And so I think it's so different. So for this group to go to Doug Wilson and say, we don't want him around, because how often, how long do you see him in the dressing room? Yeah.
Sure, but you know what it is? I think, Kev, he has always given off this persona in a lot of different places that he is sort of like a me guy. And I think in the end, that's what's really
hurting. He does give out that vibe. I mean, we've all interviewed him, and he does seem to, sort of exude that it's all about kind of me. He's not one of those humble guys. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So, but anyway, just switching and going over to the Nathan MacKinnon story, because there's really not much way for us to further the Kane story. Yes. But what happened is Zadora, who do you get traded to? Calgary?
Yes.
Calgary, yeah. So used to play for Colorado, ended up with Chicago, got traded recently to Calgary, was talking about Nathan MacKinnon and talking about how this guy's so devoted now to winning that he spends up to $100,000 a year on a dietitian. And he came into the Colorado dressing room one day, and most of the modern dressing rooms now have sort of kitchen facilities, and sometimes they serve breakfast and lunch in there. And MacKinnon came in and said, "Look, no more white sauce on the spaghetti. We're only going to have chickpea pasta because it has more protein in it, and no more sugar drinks in this room. All that, they're all gone, because we're going to be careful. Now, if you want to do all that, you can do it in the off season. But when we're trying to win a cup, that's what we're going to watch what we put in our bodies here in this dressing room." And I read that and I thought, wow, I wonder what the reaction is, because I would say the majority of players today would think that was a really good idea, because I've told this story often, but it's now been 3 seasons ago where a player said, if you want to eat a hamburger these days and you're a player, you got to do it by yourself, because if you're out with someone and you order a burger and it's a teammate, he's going to give you grief for putting that in your body.
It's funny because Nathan MacKinnon is teammates with Nazem Kadri. And as soon as I read this story, I remember the story because I was covering during the lockout, covering the Marlies, and Nazem Kadri had been taken to the carpet by Dallas Eakins, then Marlies coach, about not being in the best of shape and being a little chubby, and the quinoa was brought up, and Kadri didn't know what quinoa was. It got to the point where Don Cherry talked about it on Coach's Corner. And, these players now, I think, are much more attuned to their own bodies than players even 6, 7, 8 years ago were. And what McKinnon talked about, or what Zadorov talked about regarding McKinnon, doesn't surprise me. But the lengths that he went to in terms of having somebody live with him and be essentially his personal chef and all that. I mean, and he's spending pretty good resources here, $100,000 a year, a psychotherapist, $1,000 a day. Yeah, that's real. That's serious money that he's spending to, extend his career and be the best player that he can be.
Yeah, I in the chat room, I saw somebody say, well, they were talking about eating pizza or whatever after a game. We used to see that all the time after every game with every team. And like the Flyers, as an example, with a pizza coming into their room and the opponent's room, you don't see it anymore. Now, we did see it during the Stanley Cup, but this is after the Stanley Cup, right? I mean, of course you're going to see it. But I don't see it as much anymore. And I actually, what I do see after practice on the table are fruits and less sugary drinks and things that Kevin is talking about. And, to be honest, you can't think about this as a regular person. You have to think about this as becoming a super athlete. And in the end, Nathan McKinnon knows what that takes, and a lot of these other guys don't. Well, so he is trying to show them the way, and you know what? If it's a little bit of bullying to make the team better, I'm okay with it.
Well, maybe it's a road home thing. I know that in Toronto for Leaf games, yeah, it's much more healthy, much more food that, like you said, fruits and other things after the game, before the game. I've been in the Leaf locker room after the game in Buffalo, and it's pizza and wings. Now maybe it's because they're in Buffalo, and but you know what? The way
they're in Buffalo, there's going to be times when they're going to stray.
Yeah, the way the Leafs have played in Buffalo over the years, maybe they should cut out the pizza and wings.
Well, it's funny. Like someone brought up Gary Roberts, and I did just interview Gary like a few months ago, and he was one of the first guys that was eating protein bars and other things. And he would bring a blender and he would make everybody on the team drinks, and he was doing it out of his pocket. So it is incumbent on the team, if they're going to feed these guys, to feed them something good and not garbage. I mean, I totally get it. It does make a difference. It does. There are some teams, and I can tell you there are at least a few members on the Flyers that could definitely do better diet-wise, and it would help their career. It would.
No,
yeah. Well, I do a podcast, obviously, with Tom Laidlaw, the former NHL defenseman.
Yeah, who's in amazing shape.
Yeah, well, and he has completely transformed his life through a true grit lifestyle. Gets up 3:30 in the morning.
That part's crazy.
Goes 16. He goes 16 hours every day where he puts no food in his body. He only eats, and he has to put in 4,500 calories because of all the workouts that he does. So he's really intense about this. But I had to laugh when I read the opening couple of paragraphs of that story because they mentioned chickpea pasta. Well, that is a huge thing for Laidlaw. He makes a lot of meals. He does all of his own meal preparation, but and he uses chickpea pasta. That's a real big thing for him. But I was going to bring up a couple of years ago. It must have been 2 or 3 years ago now. I interviewed Charlie Coyle at the NHL media tour in the fall, and during the summer. Now he is totally ripped. If people don't know this, and during the off season, he has all of his meals prepped, based on his dietary needs, and then they're delivered to him. So that's all he eats during the summer is the meals that are prepared to, make him lean, mean fighting machine. And I contrast that to, I remember this story when there's a big goal. I think it was triple overtime. Igor Larionov scored in the Stanley Cup final against the Carolina Hurricanes in that 2002 Stanley Cup final. And that series actually could have gone either way. It was 2-1 Detroit at that time, and then that goal gave Detroit a 3-1 win. But what I remember about it was the interview the next day with Thomas Holmstrom, who had played a great game in that. And he said the only disappointing thing about it was at the end, he was actually rooming with Igor Larionov. And he said that game went forever, and he goes, I was absolutely starved. And so I got back. I can't wait. I'm going to order room service. And I get in, and I start calling up. And he goes, I'm ordering hamburgers and fries and everything. And Igor takes the phone and said, send us up a fruit plate. And that's all he would let Thomas Holmstrom eat after that big game with a plate of fruit. So things have changed.
I'll tell you, I admire, because I've never tried chickpea pasta, and so I'll have to try it once to say I've tried it and say yes or no. But I've tried, like, in the store you can buy zucchini pasta or squash pasta.
Right.
That's not bad. But I'm sorry, I'm Italian. I like regular pasta too much to give it up. So I don't know how people have the discipline to be able to swear off of it. It's, I guess I'll stay fat the rest of the rest.
Well, I will tell you this: we don't want this to extend to the media, because one year we did show up at the combine and it was in Buffalo, and they decided to make it healthier. And you don't need to make the media healthier. The players, yes. The media, no. If we're away, we want to eat better, because we're there for 8-10 hours. We don't want to eat salads all day for 8 to 10 hours. That's all I want to tell you.
Some gabagoo on rye. Oh, okay.
Right.
That's capicola. Okay, now I saw this report, and of course I was thinking of the Leaf angle to this, but I want the Swedes, Team Sweden, are having their Olympic preliminary camp next week in Stockholm. We have not heard any announcement for Team USA. The only thing we've heard about Team USA was Mike Sullivan being named the coach. We have not heard anything about camp. And normally, in normal years, camp is in the middle of August usually.
Right. Yeah.
So we have not heard anything for Team Canada. We have not heard anything for Team USA. Just looking at the Swedish, they've invited 27 players. They only invited 2 goalies, so that would tell me that those are the 2 goalies that are. And usually they'll carry a third, but the goalies that they invited were Markstrom and Linus Ullmark. So I would think those 2 are guaranteed to make the Olympic squad.
That makes sense.
Yeah, what's that, Russ?
It makes sense.
Yeah. Now, okay, I'm just going to name because it's quick here. I'm just going to name the defensemen, and they'll probably have to cut down to, I think it's 23, 24. Maybe they increase the sizes.
I think it's 25 for the Olympics now.
Yeah, and maybe because of COVID that they'll have extra players just in case. But on defense, Brodin, Rasmus Dahlin, Ekholm, Ekman Larson, Eric Gustafsson, if you can believe it. Probably for the power play. Yeah. Victor Hedman, John Klingberg, and Hampus Lindholm. Now that's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Gustafsson's on because you always need someone for the first cut. So
true. And honestly, I can't imagine any of the other ones being cut.
No, they won't get cut. Gustafsson will.
Yeah, so I mean that's a pretty good defensive core. Forwards: Michael Backlund, Burakovsky, Backstrom, Eriksson Ek, Jesper Fast, which, that's more penalty killer, fourth line guy. Philip Forsberg, Carl Hagelin, Patrick Hornquist, Matthias Janmark, Kalle Jarnkrok, William Karlsson. Erik Karlsson was not selected. Gabriel Landeskog, Elias Lindholm, Elias Pettersson, Silfverberg, Alexander Wenberg, and Mika Zibanejad. And by the way, William Nylander was not selected. That's why it perked up my ears. I was a little surprised.
That's stunning. That. Actually, it's stunning that Nylander's not on that team.
Now that that doesn't we've seen
guys get added.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's very, very, very possible, but. I mean, not to the specifics there, because there's gonna be an entire regular season or half a season, so yeah, they can choose. But I'm a little surprised, Kev, that we have not heard anything in terms of scheduling for USA or scheduling for Canada.
Yeah, no, I think USA Hockey has said they really want to be officially confirmed before they do anything. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, there's been some roadblocks recently. There was negotiations that kind of broke down just recently. I can't even remember what it was over, but I saw a story about it. So I don't know. It's in the schedule. So I think they believe we're eventually going to get there. I know the players want to go. I know the league may not want to go, but they'll go because they promised they would go. So, I still think it's going to happen, but, who knows? So. It's funny, but the players who aren't going to the Olympics like that as much as those who go, because they get that nice vacation. You promise your kids a trip to Disney World, and that's when you provide it for them if you're an NHL player.
That's a good point. I mean, I think Sweden is just trying to stay a step ahead because they can get these guys together, and I think the other countries are kind of like the U.S. and Canada as an example. It's a little bit more of a chore to get some of their guys together. And so I think they're really waiting for definites because
now those camps aren't all that important, to be honest.
No.
Yeah, what was the one Canada camp? They didn't even skate. I think they played like
broomball
road hockey or broomball or something.
Yeah,
and I think it was an insurance situation that they weren't allowed to be on the ice, so that was the
right.
It was more about team building and things of that nature.
Yeah, I miss those kind of coaching things where you remember when Bob Johnson took the Calgary Flames bowling? Yeah, like that. I used to love those stories. Everybody showed up for practice, and Bob said, we're going down to the bowling alley, and then,
for team building, that's good.
Yeah, at the World Championships too, he couldn't get a room to do the power play, so he did it in the hallway between elevator there, so people would get off the elevator and there'd be the American team, all sitting around there, looking, and Bob was diagramming the power play on the floor between two banks of elevators. So
I think after one of the Olympics, Roenick and a few of his teammates did the power play in the room, and it looked like it after they left. Yeah,
especially the walls. The walls didn't handle the shot from the point very well.
Yeah.
Now, off the ice here, some news yesterday. We've heard Wayne Gretzky being hired by Turner for their in between period show. ESPN's hired a number of people. Well, they hired Torts yesterday, and I actually like this hiring. I did see Torts on TSN for the small time that he was on there. He was a lot better than Ty Domi. He was pretty good. So I think that Torts will be good.
He will be real good. He's very intelligent, and I know some people think that he's being a hypocrite because he always treated the media with disdain. But I've told this story many times. But when you get John Tortorella one-on-one, as I did on several occasions, he's terrific. He's very analytical. He understands, what you're trying to. He's a deep thinker. He's philosophical about the game. He can see all sides of issues. He's actually entertaining. So what you see, that kind of explosive Tortorella, isn't always the case. And
no, that's a good point.
We'll never see it. We'll never see it on television.
No, but it's a good point because when I was at one of the drafts, because when we do the show with Sirius, we're on the draft floor, and I was walking, around the concourse, maybe where the food is, and Tortorella was there, and he said, "Hey, how's it going? Good to see you." And I was like literally shocked that John Tortorella was saying that to me. And I'm not shocked that he, recognized my face. I was just shocked that he did that. So I think what you're saying is right, Kurt.
All right. Wanted to touch on some of the free agents that are still out there. And we don't, obviously we're at this point where it's August 4th. We've got over 5-6 weeks until the starts of training camp. Most teams are going to want to get their rosters squared away, but we know that, later on in the year, or later on in the summer, as it gets closer to training camp, you'll have teams that'll invite players who are, invite them as training camp invites on PTOs, and then maybe decide that they're going to offer them a contract during training camp. But just to go through the list of some of these players that are free agents right now to see whether I think that some of them will get a job. I did see a report that that Travis Zajac, who got traded from the Devils to the Islanders at the deadline, that he's not ready to hang them up and that he's looking for another contract. Russ, I'll start with you. He didn't play too badly in the playoffs. maybe he doesn't go back to the Devils. Maybe he's somebody who, if they don't sign Cizikas, could be a fourth-line center fallback for the Islanders.
Read my lips, Mike. He will be an Islander.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So half the people on this list who played for the Islanders who haven't been signed yet are going to be Islanders.
Yep. That's true.
Okay. Well, I'll skip those then because
you might as well skip them. I'm telling you.
Parise, Zajac.
The only way it doesn't happen is if Pelech gets some stunning award in arbitration and it gets to arbitration. Then that could change the plans.
Okay. On the non-Islander page, I'll go through a few
there
of these. James Neal, who was bought out by the Oilers, only had 5 goals in 29 games last year. He's 33 years old. He's slowed down, but maybe he could. Maybe some team will offer him a veteran minimum deal. Kevin, do you think James Neal's somebody who could, still get a job in the NHL?
Sounds like an $800,000 player for the Arizona Coyotes to me. He's only a year removed from being a 19-goal scorer. It's not like he's 140 years old.
Except he had 12 of those goals really early on in that season. He had a bunch of goals.
He still got 19.
I know.
You got 19 that thing.
They still count at the beginning of the year, Russ.
I know.
And when you look at what teams pay $800,000 for, you could do worse than
true.
And like if I was Buffalo, I'd look at him for $800,000.
Buffalo's going to have to add some salary somewhere. Yeah.
If you're there are some teams out there that need some scoring, and I think you'd be good. Same thing with Thomas Tatar. Thomas Tatar had 6 or 7 consecutive 20-goal seasons until he had that poor season, and he kind of got in the Canadiens' doghouse. Like, he's still a guy that can find the net. He's got a good nose for the net.
Yeah, he's going to get you 50, 55 points for sure.
Well, he's certainly going to get 20 goals if he gets the right opportunity. So.
It's funny that the narrative that's been floated out about Tatar is, well, he made the Stanley Cup final with Vegas. He made his team made the Stanley Cup final, Montreal and Vegas, and in both instances he was healthy scratched in the finals. But yeah, you need guys to score during the regular season. So I'm sorry.
And look, he's not a good defensive player, but again, that is more of a take on the coaches that made it and saying, well, we want everybody to play this great defensive two-way hockey, and he's not that guy.
Yeah. Now, I'm a little surprised that he hasn't been signed yet, but Tyler Bozak, who was making $5 million last year, had an injury-shortened season, reportedly is healthy, but 35 years old, has slowed down a bit. I thought there was a possibility he may go back to Toronto if Toronto had traded a guy like Kerfoot to be their number 3 center. But, it's August 4th and he hasn't been signed. Russ, do you think that the door is closed on Bozak, or do you think, somebody gives him a 1-year deal?
I think somebody will invite him into camp. I don't know if he's getting a 1-year deal anymore. I know that sounds kind of rough, but there used to be a real shortage of the kind of centers that he is, but he wasn't the greatest skater to begin with. And now it's like, unless you want him for 4C, you're not going to want to pay him, like Kevin said, probably more than $800,000 like everybody else. So he might be a very last-minute guy.
Kev, what do you think?
I think that as well. PTO guy.
Yeah.
You look around and everybody's pretty full up in terms of their roster spots, and there's always injuries
right
during training camp. And the other guy out there is Zdeno Chara, and I kind of wonder if he's got a handshake agreement with somebody who may be having salary cap issues or roster, and is going to a GM saying, look, we'll find a spot for you, but give me some time to work it out. So
yeah, I mean it's funny because and of course I'm focused on the Leafs. Kyle Dubas, when he came out at the beginning of free agency, said, we're looking for a veteran defenseman to replace Zach Bogosian, who they had as a bottom pairing guy. And yesterday, to the horror of some Leaf fans, I suggested a guy like Eric Branson, because
how dare you, Mike?
Big right-handed defenseman, not particularly fleet of foot, but still capable of playing on the bottom pairing and clearing the front of the net on penalty kills. They probably look for somebody right-handed, because most of their young defensemen are left-handed, except for Liljegren from the first-round pick. But somebody suggested Chara, and I'm like, okay. They brought in Thornton. They brought in Spezza. They like bringing in veteran character. Chara would make a ton of sense if you now I don't know if he wants to play in Canada. I don't know if he wants to play in the same division as the Bruins. But Russ, I could see Chara being a fit with the Leafs on the bottom pairing as long as they guarantee to play him. I think that's all he wants, is a guarantee that he'll play.
Yeah, I think 16 minutes. Yeah.
He's definitely looking for that, but I wonder if he's just looking at it like, maybe I don't feel like playing at all anymore. I mean, he could be thinking about that. We really haven't heard from Chara at all.
No, but he hasn't retired yet, so you would think.
No, but I mean, a lot of times guys don't. Like, a lot of times we get these, emails from the PA, like mid-season that says, hey, Zdeno Chara's hung it up. Here's what he did. Like, how many of those do we get a year now? We get like 3 or 4 a year.
Right. No, I mean, but we heard about like Matt Calvert, and there was one other fairly prominent player that retired. We heard about them straight away. And, to me, if he's still unretired
Chara's
in the first week.
He's not very public,
Yeah.
Well, some enterprising reporter needs to go to Zdeno Chara's garage, find the nail, and see if his skates are hanging on it. Then we'll know.
Well, no, I was going to say, go to the nearest hill next to Zdeno Chara's house, and if he's pushing one of those big truck tires up the hill, then he's playing again, because that's what he does.
He's tired of doing that.
Yeah. If he's tired of pushing the tire. So
I'd be tired of doing that if I did it once, Russ.
I know. Well, that's what I'm saying.
Speaking of that, though, hanging your skates on a nail, I saw today, and I knew of this tradition, of course, but one of the wrestlers at the Olympics brought his shoes out and put them in the center of the mat after he had won the gold medal. And I think that's one of the coolest traditions ever. And they have that tradition in wrestling. When you hang it up, you announce it by putting your shoes in the middle of the mat. But I think we should do that in hockey. You should take your skates and drop them off at center ice after a game is over. Have a little.
As long as you spray them first. Even some of my sneakers have a pretty ripe. I mean, I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah.
Jeez.
But the tradition of putting your skates on a nail is a good one. So
it is. We did have a breaking news yesterday. It was kind of funny. Tuukka Rask was seen on crutches at the Guns N' Roses concert at Fenway Park, and people are just posting pictures and just putting the worst kinds of things up on there. And it's just like, can you leave the guy alone for a few months? Just let him rehab. He lives in the area. Maybe you'll get him back on your team. Can you just leave the guy alone? You
know what, Bruce? He's made fun of more than Bill Buckner.
I know. It's crazy.
It's ridiculous. Okay, a couple more names here. Eric Stahl, who underwhelmed in Buffalo, underwhelmed for Montreal during the regular season, but played decently for them, I'd have to say, in a fourth line role in the playoffs. He's made a lot of money in his career. I don't know whether he wants to go someplace and be a third or fourth liner. But Rusty, at age 36, do you think someone will come a-calling?
I think he's picky about where he wants to go, and I think that's the problem. Like, maybe he'd go to Winnipeg, right, because it's close by. Maybe he would, maybe he just wants to play for a Canadian team, so maybe he's just going to sort of wait it out until somebody has an injury. I can see him being picky about where he might want to play. I don't think he's going back to Carolina. No.
Maybe he'd want to play with his – well, I was going to say maybe he'd want to play with his brother Mark in Detroit.
He just got Stepan. I think that's –
no room in the end in Detroit.
Yeah.
That's a good
no
deal. A good fit, in my opinion, would be Columbus. You go there, accept a third or fourth line role, but
That would be a good fit.
Thinking in your head, yeah, but I'll play well enough to move in. They don't really have a 1 or a 2 to speak of that's overwhelming. So I'll play well and I'll get one of those top 6 spots.
Yeah. Russ, Sami Vatanen had injury problems with New Jersey, got traded to Dallas at the deadline. From what I recall, he didn't play a lot in Dallas. I think he was more just a, injury reserve type of guy. Maybe he played occasionally. But a few years ago, this guy was a top 4 defenseman, a right-hand shot, somebody that was desirable on the trade market. He's 30 years old. He's not particularly big, and maybe he's slowed down. I don't know. I don't know what.
And those are the 2 strikes against him. It is. He's not particularly big. He has slowed down a little bit, and his points have been underwhelming when he's gotten a lot of ice time. And so nobody wants to give big money for a Sami Vatanen. Somebody would bring him in for $800,000, but I don't think he would take $800,000, and I think that's why he's still out there.
Kev?
Yeah. Veteran defensemen are always valuable. So he's going to be one of those guys that's just going to have to wait around. And, somebody always gets hurt in training.
Right.
Always.
Oh, yeah.
Always gets hurt. So.
One more here. Where was it? Oh, yeah. Okay. Alex Chiasson, who a couple years ago had a pretty decent season with the Edmonton Oilers. He got a multi-year deal at a little over $2 million, and then really, I think he wasn't playing in a top 6 role as their, as Kailer Yamamoto and other play, and Puljujärvi came into Edmonton. Only 9 goals in 45 games last year. He's 30, so he's still relatively young. I think this is a guy who gets a 1-year deal someplace, maybe a training camp invite, but I'm surprised that he hasn't been signed yet, Russ.
Which player? Sorry, Mike. Alex
Chiasson.
Chiasson. Yeah, I like Chiasson, and he can score some goals. He's decent around the net. He is not the fastest guy either. And so unless you're signing him for a 4th line role and maybe in front of the net on the second power play, he's not going to get a deal. So I think he's another guy. I mean, we're at the point in this sport in a flat cap where the middle of the market has dropped out. So guys like Chiasson, who could get a 2-year deal for, decent, not great money, but like $1.5 million, whatever, that money's gone. And now you have to accept a 1-year deal at almost the bare minimum if you want to keep playing. And he's one of those guys that falls into that pit.
Well, Kevin, the common thread, I'm looking at this list, of the top 30 free agents based on what they made last year, and the common thread on all of them is a 3 at the beginning of their age.
The declining production the previous season.
Yeah,
all the guys we've mentioned had numbers that went down for whatever reason, and although a lot of them it just was coaching decisions, I would argue that if you give Tatar the same opportunities he usually gets, and he would have been right where he was before. Another good example, like Ryan Murray went from a $4.6 million defenseman to being a $2 million defenseman who could only get 1 year on a contract. Well, why did that happen? Because he didn't work very well in his coach's system in New Jersey. Right. But had he been in some other system, people would still say, boy, Ryan Murray, steady, dependable, two-way guy, not exceptional, but never bad. And
he was drafted 2nd overall. I think he was in Columbus for 6 or 7, maybe 7 or 8 years. In the end, when they made their run in the playoffs, he was a bottom pairing defenseman. He was on their 3rd pair. So and when he was traded to New Jersey, he was traded as basically a salary dump. So I think he's a good defenseman. I thought it was a really good signing by Colorado, but he's probably going to end up on the bottom pairing in Colorado, and then not because he's not good enough, but because they're so deep on the blue line. That's where he's going to fit. And $2 million is a bottom pairing salary.
Yeah, but you're always looking for steady, dependable defensemen. Although last year, I bet Lindy Ruff would argue that he wasn't steady and dependable. Because if he was, Lindy would have used him. So it's players say all the time that it's always about opportunity and circumstances, and there are several players out there that I think can make a pretty good case for that.
Yeah, and just to finish it off here,
I got one more too for you.
Okay, go ahead, Russ.
So, I just saw a tweet sent earlier today from Henrik Lundqvist about a food bank, because he has a charity organization that he works with, and he's got his own foundation. That is a guy who somebody will invite in if they feel like he could still take their at least the backup job, or possibly take the number one, especially if there's an injury or something in camp. He is going to get some phone calls if he stays on the ice and proves that he might be able to come back.
Pittsburgh?
Maybe.
I mean, that's a team that Edmonton. There's a team that didn't address their.
He would have to fight Stalock, but I get it. Yeah.
Russ has been pushing Stalock.
Oh my God.
Great, yeah. I will say this about because I've been on him too for getting to get rid of Koskinen, but I was researching something else, and I ended up looking at goalie starts, and Mike Smith had a pretty good season last year.
Yes, he did.
He had a strong save percentage, number of quality starts, whatever that advanced statistic about hard saves. His number was good on that as well. He had a pretty good. The problem is not Mike Smith, although it is a problem that he's 107 years old.
Yeah.
So you have to start thinking about beyond. But they gave him a 2-year deal.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get a 2-year deal when I'm 107 too. So,
but see, this is the thing in the league now. The amount, especially even if you're a veteran player, the years don't matter, because if he decides to retire after the first year, it drops off. It's not the 35 and over anymore, where it's onerous. I think.
No, but I mean, nobody walked away from.
No, that's true.
Yeah,
I'll give you another
barely. So
I'll give you another team that would probably interest someone like Lundqvist if they had a problem. So let's say, Dallas starts off and they realize, Bishop's going to be hurt. And, we just have Khudobin. We don't really trust Ottinger, or maybe we want to give Ottinger just a backup job here. Maybe Dallas invites him in. There's going to be a team that could invite in someone like Lundqvist and find the playing time for him, even if it's just a split time, because he's not going to play a ton of games. But I just have this inkling that he hasn't hung it up yet. Now, it doesn't mean he'll be good, but it just doesn't mean
he doesn't. I don't think he wants to hang it up, but I think it really will matter who the team is.
It does.
I don't see him going to Edmonton.
No.
Just a gut feeling, but it just doesn't feel right to me. Had the Flyers called him up and said, Carter Hart came off a bad season, Henrik. We don't know where he's at. We need some insurance. Will you be our insurance? That would make a heck of a lot more sense than Martin Jones, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
And as Mike said, Pittsburgh, we're not quite sure. We think this kid can be good, but, can you come in? Can you mentor him? Can you give us some quality games? And, who knows? Maybe he'll end up number one.
If Lundqvist is smart, Kev, he starts showing himself working out on the ice, making saves, even if it's like Nicholas Sundstrom shooting on him in Sweden, whoever. And you know what? Someone like Pittsburgh might give him a call.
Yeah. I mean, he's not going to Arizona or Buffalo or any of those places. So,
and make sure that William Nylander isn't jumping on you, because that's how he got hurt the last. Right. But the final point on the list here, there are two players who are 29 years old. Branson turns 30, I think, before the beginning of the season. But the youngest player on this top 30 is Alex Galchenyuk, who's 27. And right before free agency, he said he was going to, the Leafs were talking to him, and they said, he's going to test free agency. Well, it's August 4th, Alex, and you've tested it, and now the musical chairs have happened, and the music has stopped, and you don't
got another month, Mike.
Oh, no, and I'm just saying, Russ, I can see him possibly going back to the Leafs on a 1-year league minimum deal. I think he thought that, after playing well for them for like about, I think, 15 games, 20 games, that there would be suitors out there. But people are still skeptical of the Alex Galchenyuk, who's been on 6 teams in the last few years.
Yeah, I guess. I thought he played well for the Leafs. I did. I didn't think he played badly at all. But, the way you talk about all these players that can play for the Leafs, they're going to have like 30 guys on the roster.
Well, I'm not saying all of them will, Russ. I'm saying,
well, he could go and play for the Leafs, and he could come in on the minimum for the Leafs. This guy.
People are criticizing my column yesterday, saying, well, they could add or my tweet that they could add Gabranson, and it says, well, Mike, they're already over the cap. So is Tampa, and then they traded for Brent Seabrook, and the Leafs did that a couple years ago when they traded for David Clarkson, just so they could use LTIR to get under the cap, so they could add more players. And I'm telling you, I think that's a possibility, because I can't see the Leafs just doing what they've done, some minor moves. I think there are still moves that they could make, and they need more cap flexibility. And Kyle Dubas and Brandon Pridham, who's their capologist, they're very inventive, and I could see them trading for a Ryan Kessler, who's an injured guy. So, just like Brisebois did with Seabrook. So we'll see. And Seabrook, by the way, has 3 years left at almost $7 million. So that's $7 million
retirement plan.
Yeah, you don't trade for a injured player to add $3 million players. You only do that if there's a big player you want to go. So I don't see him doing that to bringing in $1 million players.
No, but there is a move to be made. So we'll see if that happens. But okay, great show, guys. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just